Good morning. My name is Lauren Eichelberger. I am the current district attorney here in Perry County. On May 27, 2014, a male was discovered in the area of Rye Township, Perry County, PA. Members of the Pennsylvania State Police and the Perry County Coroner's Office initiated an investigation into these skeletal remains. It revealed the man was a victim of homicide by way of a gunshot wound to the head. Unable to identify him further based solely on his remains, and no other identifying items in hand, there were very few leads left to follow. For nearly 9 years, the victim remained unidentified. Fortunately, modern genetic genealogy technology has opened new doors for cases just like this. In 2022, the Perry County District Attorney's Office obtained a grant from Season of Justice to extract DNA from John Doe. Dr. Knoll of Knoll Family Dentistry then generously donated his time and expertise to complete that extraction, which was later sent to Othram Labs for forensic testing. I am pleased to announce that John Doe finally has a name. Michael Allen Holliber, pictured to our right, would have been 47 years old at the time his remains were found. After learning Mr. Holliver was living in the area of Strasburg, Virginia at the time of his disappearance, State Police joined forces with detectives from the Strasburg Police Department in Virginia to further this investigation. They determined Mr. Holliber was shot and killed by an acquaintance, James Callahan, at a residence in Strasburg, Virginia. Shortly thereafter, Callahan transported, disposed of Mr. Holliber's body in Perry County, Pennsylvania, where he was eventually found by a hiker in May of 2014. Today, I am happy to announce that not only does Mr. Holliber have a name, but on September 26, 2023, an arrest was made in Strasburg, Virginia for his murder. I am grateful to the Pennsylvania State Police for their diligence and determination to find answers for Mr. Holliber and his family. Time passes quickly when there are new cases to investigate every day, but this case is a testament to the fact that even when time passes, unsolved cases are never forgotten. And as the state police have also said, it is possible to solve every crime, even the ones that seem impossible. I will now hand this over to Lieutenant Tallman, Kenneth Tallman, to speak a little bit further as to these matters.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Lieutenant Kenneth Tallman. I'm the station commander at Troop H Newport Station. The investigation lasted 9 years. The investigators exhausted all leads and worked tirelessly to identify the victim. The inability to identify the victim made the investigation extremely difficult for the investigators, who remained tenacious and persistent, and their efforts never ceased. After receipt of the DNA and the forensic genealogy results, investigators and an intelligence analyst from our Bureau of Criminal Investigation, along with Othram Labs, did some fantastic work and identified a distant family member of the victim. Through interviews and a DNA comparison, investigators ultimately identified the victim as Michael Holliber. The victim's identity occurred in February of 2023, and finally, through victimology, the investigation accelerated quickly. The investigative team standing alongside me here today, some of those members, did excellent police work and worked with several law enforcement agencies throughout the country to assist with processing DNA evidence and interviewing victims or witnesses. From the time the victim was first identified to when PSP investigators met with representatives from Strasburg Police Department because the suspect had been identified was less than 6 months. The remarkable thing was that the victim was not from Pennsylvania. Thus, investigators had to travel out of state to conduct interviews and work with law enforcement all throughout the country, to include West Virginia, and as far away as Texas. I cannot say enough about how impressed I am with the incredible work done by these investigators, not only amongst themselves, but with other law enforcement agencies throughout the country, to resolve this case successfully and provide the victim's family with some closure. I would also like to thank Dr. Dennis Dirkmatt from Mercyhurst University and his students, who assisted us back in May of 2014 with processing and analyzing the evidence from the Idle Road scene. Lastly, I want to thank Perry County District Attorney Lauren Eichelberger for her commitment to identifying this victim and seeing that the individual responsible for the homicide is brought to justice. Because of her tenacity, we are able to secure grant funding to complete the DNA analysis and the forensics genealogy, which eventually resulted in us identifying Mr. Holliver. There is no I in team, and that certainly held true in this investigation. The members of this investigative team from the Pennsylvania State Police did outstanding work, but without the help of other law enforcement partners and so many outside organizations, this would have not been a success. So thank you. And then I will allow you to, if you want to take questions.
Can you spell the
Yeah,
victim's
I was
name
gonna
for
spell
us?
the,
Victim
actually
and
both the victim and
suspect.
Sure.
suspect and ages
That's
or.
Mr. Oliver.
That is Mr. Holliver, and his last name is spelled Hollober. The defendant in this matter, or the individual arrested for this crime, last name is spelled Callahhan.
What are their ages exactly?
Mr. Holliver is 47, and as for Mr. Callahan,
I don't remember.
He was 47 when he died.
Mr. Holliver was 47 at the time.
She said that.
His remains would have been 47 at the time his remains were found. His remains were there for an extended period of time.
Do you have any guesses as to how long?
I can't entirely speculate on that.
Why did why was the body found here and not in Virginia?
Beyond our, again, this may be speculation, beyond the belief that Mr. Callahan had some knowledge of the northern Pennsylvania area, all we know, as far as we know, is he picked a road and found a place.
When you talk about, because you mentioned there's a lot of different places you had to go to research this particular case. Can you talk just about the manpower and the time that takes? Because it really is, I mean, just given the locations Lieutenant Tallman mentioned, like that's pretty intensive.
Well, I know as soon as he was identified in February of 2023, they began this investigation, and I don't know, I will look to the state police, have you calculated how much time and energy has been spent in hours or even individuals?
I don't even think you could put a number on it.
Hundreds.
Yeah,
Hundreds of
a
hours.
lot.
And that's going back, that's 9 years from the time we didn't know who
Can
this.
you speak at the podium on that?
Sure.
Yeah.
This investigation lasted 9 years. A lot of members from the Pennsylvania State Police, lab personnel, analysts, like a lot of people put a lot of hard work into this case over the years. To put a number on how many hours, can't put a thumb on it, but I would venture to say probably thousands and thousands of hours, and a lot of time went into this case.
Can you
In
talk a
terms of
little
the
bit-
DNA, yeah.
Oh, can you talk a little bit more about the relationship between these two men? How they knew each other, what you guys know about the relationship, what kind of led up to, him allegedly killing Mr. Holliver?
I don't want to speculate too much on that matter, but I can say that we do, in our media release, there is contact information for the offices in Virginia that furthered and are furthering the prosecution of this matter.
The improvements in DNA technology, I think we often think of it as something, cold cases from back in the 80s, it didn't exist, and now we find something. You mentioned that between 2014 and now there were advances. What are the kinds of things, even since 2014, that you couldn't do then that you can do now?
I honestly can't speak to the science or exactly what those specific developments are, but I know a lot of this is a matter of not only manpower but also financial assistance as well. This was, even if these capabilities were around, it's difficult to find the funds to send them to the lab to get these results. It's a very expensive process. And so that was why we needed to find that grant funding to do that. But as for the science, I can't exactly speak to those developments.
Can you talk about the family members of Mr. Holliver finding out, this information, the arrest was made, he was identified? I mean, what was that like? What the emotions they're feeling?
And I would look to the investigators that spoke to them directly. Again, I was along for the ride in terms of the investigation because it was merely a matter of putting it in their hands at that point.
Do you have more to say on that?
Yeah. So I spoke directly with,
Can you just come up with the
yeah, sure. So my name's Corporal Kyle Tobin, Tobin. So I spoke directly with one of the family members last night, his brother. He was extremely thankful. He got a little teary-eyed on the phone. and just couldn't have thanked us more. I think at one point he told me, he said, if I could have came up here and give you guys a hug, I would have. It went a long time, and he just didn't know what happened to his brother when his brother dropped off the face of the earth.
So he's in Virginia too?
Virginia Beach.
Virginia Beach.
You know, there's been a number of cases around this particular region recently that have been solved through DNA and some of the after, you know, years down the road investigative techniques. Can you just talk about the idea that this stuff's never really resolved until you are able to finally bring that case forward and that there's hope?
Correct. I mean, this is one of those things I mentioned at the end in terms of, you know, we have new cases that come in every single day, but I can't tell you how often I walked into the state police barracks and there was Mr. Holliber's, you know, particularly after he was identified, his picture on the whiteboard with a list of to-dos and tasks that needed to be completed to actually bring charges in this particular matter. And I know that that wasn't the only police station or barracks that had that list of to-dos. So I think that it's always a long and arduous process, particularly when we start with a lot of unknowns. But I am incredibly thankful that we were able to do so and finally reach a conclusion, at least in this matter, and now that prosecution itself can move forward in Strasburg, Virginia. So any further additional questions in relation to, you looked like you had one.
Well, no, actually, we just wanted, while we have you, we wanted
Sure.
to ask you about the Bostock, Barry Bostock. Would you want to do that on the side, or do you want to, or should we just go ahead now?
Sure, I would prefer to speak to that after we conclude this particular conference, if we could.
That's fine.
But any further questions related to Mr. Holliber and his identification can be forwarded to my office. There is a media release which I have to provide you with as well, and there is contact information for the Strasburg Police Department, if I recall correctly, so that you can further your questions related to the prosecution and their portion of the investigation down there as well.
That's what I just wanted to clarify. So the case is being prosecuted in Virginia.
Correct.
Can you explain a little bit about why, even though, you know, the body was found here, I mean, the involvement of you guys and PA State Police and...
The investigation revealed that the act itself occurred in Strasburg, Virginia at a residence there. So given that the actual act occurred there and then he was transported and you know, harsh word, but disposed of in this place, the large majority of the criminal act occurred in that location.
How do you know it took place in that location? I mean, again, just knowing that there's so many different locations and
Yeah.
all these variables involved.
Yeah, again, I can't really speculate as to that aspect of the investigation, but those questions can be forwarded to the Strasburg Police Department down there.
And then the body was found, you said, near Idle Road. Can you talk a little bit more about where the remains were found, the condition of the remains?
I can state that they were on Game Commission lands near the area of Idle Road and that they were nearly skeletal when found. Aside from that, there's not much else that I can speak to. Thank you again for your time. I appreciate it.